Hi, it's Richard. Welcome to the Conscious Marketer podcast. And I'm joined by Kylie Slavek. Hi, Kylie.
Hey there.
And welcome to the listeners today. And for everybody in our community who's interested in how to sell, but sell in a way that feels good and natural and isn't all crazy and sleazy and pushy, we have a special guest for you today. That's just one of her super talents. She has a few. We have ᴄᴏ宜Ʞᴜᴜᴜ, and she is a business coach, sales trainer, and a creator of a program called Sales Power System. And she works with a lot of coaches. Hi, Emily. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Maybe we kind of start each interview off by asking you to share a little bit about your background. Can you kind of maybe give us a little bit about how you became a coach and, specifically on how you maybe pivoted into helping people with sales?
Yes, I would love to. So my origin story starts with my first business, which was environmental consulting. I feel like I fell into that completely accidentally, and I did that for many years. Really, really proud of the work that I did. And something that started to happen as I became more established and I was speaking at conferences and traveling is that everyone wanted to pick my brain. Everyone wanted to learn from me. Everyone was asking me to have coffee and dinner and get advice, and people were just asking me, how are you doing this? How is it that you're traveling around? Because people are watching my social media. They know that I'm gallivanting to whatever country I happen to be playing in at the moment. They saw me speaking on stage. They wanted to know how to do it. And at the time, I had never heard of the coaching industry. I'd heard of the big names like Tony Robbins. So I knew about personal development. I'd already been involved in personal development, but I really knew nothing about the coaching industry. And so I put up this little prayer to the universe of trying to figure this thing out and find a mentor. And I didn't even know what it was for, but I just knew that if so many people wanted this information that I had stored in my brain, that I could probably get paid for as little hustler. So, one thing led to another. And I ended up at one of those typical coaching 3-day live events. I ended up buying the mastermind, having never spent $1 on mentorship before. I made my first, 10K investment, was so freaked out. I mean, just beyond freaked out. Lost my mind actually through that whole decision-making process, which I think in some ways, although it's kind of a funny way to start, sparked my interest around sales, because I went through such an emotional roller coaster deciding whether or not I was going to invest in this program. And when I started my coaching business, I was pretty lucky. Or maybe I shouldn't say lucky. I was pretty savvy in the beginning. Let me give myself a little credit here. And I was able to get some clients in the door pretty early on, but I also noticed that I really was struggling with the sales process. So especially once I, decided I was going to launch my own group program, I was really insecure talking to people. And I had kind of two different levels of frustration that were happening at the same time. So one was the obvious one of, if no one's saying yes to me, I don't really have a business. I had like a few private clients, but I wanted to do a group program. So there was that frustration of, okay, I'm trying to make money here and it's not really happening. But then the other frustration was that I was talking to people who I knew I could make a difference for, and yet I could not get them over the finish line. Like they were leaning in. I could tell they wanted to work with me. I had no doubts that I could help them, but it just wasn't clicking. And so I ended up chatting with a girlfriend of mine who did sales for a big software company. She was the top salesperson. And I was like, what's going on here? Help me out. How do I do this? And through a bunch of different questions she asked me, something clicked. And I realized that I had to just double down on the skill of selling if I ever wanted to have a business and make an impact. Because if we can't sell, there's no one that we can work with. And none of us want to work for free all the time. And so that's what really got me interested in improving my own sales skills. But then, of course, I saw the immediate results that my own clients had when I started teaching them what I was learning for myself. And so I never in a bazillion years would have picked myself to be a sales queen. Like, it's so not how I see myself or how I saw myself then. But what was so cool in the process of becoming good at sales and honestly becoming a great trainer at sales, maybe even better than as a salesperson myself, was that so much of it came down to the way that someone was able to communicate about what they do, the level of confidence that they showed up with, the extent to which they allowed their personality to lead in the conversation. That was really interesting to me, to see that both for myself, but also my clients, leading with personality would actually help, close a sale. Not that I love to use that term, but everyone knows what that means. So that's kind of how it all started, was, me going through my own dark, pretty broke moment, and then transforming it for myself, and then developing a methodology that has proven to be extremely effective. I really, truly am still floored by the results my clients get. And I say that with a lot of humility, even though I'm sure everyone can tell I'm super excited about it at the same time. But I was really surprised to see that I basically was able to prove that someone could increase their sales and increase their close rate and all of that, increase their prices, without ever having to do manipulative, convincing, or weird salesy tactics that so many of us want to avoid. So that's kind of the long, winding answer to your question.
I saw that you had a program a few years ago, maybe it was a few years ago, where you were talking about expression, and you just mentioned your clients getting such good results by bringing their personality into it. And I know that you take a really strong stand for that in the market, and I really admire that about you. Can you talk a little bit about that? What does that mean to you? What is it? How does it play out?
Yes. So the origin of my Express program is kind of a funny one too. So for years, I was running masterminds for years, still do. And I noticed that the thing I would get most excited about when my clients were at our retreats was what we would get to do as far as their own confidence, their own self-expression, their personal power. And I noticed that every time I ran a client retreat, I was always theming it, stepping into your power. And that was just what I was so, so excited about. And I had this whisper, and I'm sure you've both experienced this. I had this whisper of an idea where I wanted to create a course that was about personal power and self-expression. But I sat on this idea for years, and I would tell people about it a little bit here and there, but I was so nervous to put it out in the world. And I had this one friend, Susan, she's amazing. And one day she just got on my butt about it. She was like, Emily, when are you launching this program? And she would basically harass me, text me. And I was like, okay, I'm really sick of Susan, driving me nuts, telling me I got to launch this program. So I just decided to do it, and it happened so fast. So I think I told my VA, like literally same day. I think we created and made the entire sales page, finished it at like 9 p.m. at night, something like that. And the next day I launched it. And there was no warm up. I didn't follow like the typical formulas of what you're supposed to do. I just put it out there in the world. I put it at a really low price. It was $4.97, and I got sales immediately. I mean, I would send one email and I would get 10 pings of people buying the program. I think we had 45 or 50 people join that first ever round, and I was shocked. And it was the first and still the only time that people came into my inbox and were commenting on my social media posts saying, oh my gosh, this is so you. I've never seen you launch anything that was so you before. And it's interesting because I think, like so many of us, not only is our zone of genius in our blind spot, but it's also something that we carry shame around. And so, and it's been so interesting for me to teach this stuff over the years, and really see what my clients' experiences are. So I really have this belief that for almost all of us, if not all of us, our zone of genius also lives in a part of us that somebody shamed in our lives, whether it was our parents, a teacher, somebody at school, a family member, a random person on the internet. There are parts of us that are so embodied and so special and so kind of nourishing and medicinal for the people around us. But for many of us, it's also a part of us that not everybody likes. And so I had gotten feedback growing up of like, why are you doing it this way? Why do you have to, dress that way? Why are you trying to stand out? And I was a theater kid too. So of course I was like kind of dramatic and big and loud and all of that. But it was so interesting for me to see that part of my gift to offer others is my self-expression, but my big, bold self-expression is a part of me that definitely is polarizing, that is definitely a turnoff. And so I noticed that a lot of my clients had similar backstories around their own zones of genius. So I think because of what I do, I tend to attract a lot of people who are in what, the vast majority of people would see as taboo niches. Probably we wouldn't see them as taboo, but I work with clients who are in the sensuality and sexuality space. I work with clients who facilitate plant medicine. I've had clients who are relationship coaches solely for gay couples. I have clients who work primarily with people of color. And so these themes that, maybe the average middle America person might have some friction against, those are the people who I work with. And so it's fascinating to me that they've been shamed for, or their spirituality. I've worked with so many psychics. I used to joke and call my mastermind the home for wayward psychics because, I had like so many clients who were psychic mediums or had other intuitive gifts, healing gifts. And so people in their lives had shamed that part of them, but that's their biggest, most brilliant gift to share. And, I think this is really common in the personal development industry. Of course, I was very confronted by this, and especially with feeling like, okay, it's really my job to walk the talk here. I was confronted with all of the places where I was self-censoring or where I was holding myself back. And early on in my business, when I was first becoming a coach, the first year or two, I felt like I was supposed to show up a certain way. And I still had my suits and my business casual from my lobbying days. I used to do lobbying on behalf of the environmental legislation I was working on. So I had all that stuff. And, I had these professional photos and all of that. But when I started to share who I really was, which is, I've been to Burning Man for more than a decade, and I'm sassy and I swear, and occasionally I do wear weird clothes or whatever. Like, I'm not always following the norm. I'm very rebellious, live more of an alternative lifestyle, maybe, again, compared with like middle America, maybe not people that we hang out with. But I saw this immediate impact on my business in a really positive way when I just started to let my own freak flag fly. And I started encouraging my clients to do the same thing. So for me, my business doubled immediately. Like, as soon as I just started being more me, my business doubled right away. And for my clients, I've noticed the same thing. And so it comes into the way that I coach people on their content, what they write about, the way they share themselves on social media, and even so far as what they sell, how they decide to do their client delivery. I travel a lot. I love to travel internationally. And I used to organize my business schedule so that I would run a client retreat, and not even kidding you, that night, take like a midnight flight to Bali. Like, that's how I would celebrate myself going through this hard push of getting the retreat together and putting on an amazing experience for my clients. And then I would go treat myself to a trip and go live in Bali for a month or two at a time. And so it's just been, it's been this ongoing process for me to kind of check myself and really ask, am I really expressing myself here? And am I writing or sharing from wanting to control other people's reactions, or at least trying to, because of course we can't. But the expression stuff has really been something that I've noticed can and needs to permeate every aspect of the business. So I now, even in my interview process, when I'm hiring on my team, we talk about my beliefs and my values and the type of niches my clients work in, and make sure that whoever I'm bringing onto the team is comfortable knowing that, my clients are talking about orgasms and plant medicine and psychedelics and all of this stuff. So it's been a really fun journey, and it's been so rewarding for me to feel that freedom inside of myself, but even more so to just witness that transformation in my clients and have them see that not only are they safe sharing more of who they are with the world, but that it's lucrative and that they're going to attract people they're more excited to work with, because it's like they're putting out this most aligned, true version of who they are. And that's what will be magnetic to the right people. So I think a lot of times people water themselves down. They're worried about turning people off, but I know you guys know this, that the more that we can magnetize and attract the people who are really, really a right fit for us, the more satisfied we will be, the better results the clients are going to get, because there's no surprises. And I think in the beginning, I would keep some of my lifestyle a secret because I felt like it wasn't professional. So I would hide a little bit about the travel, and then I would have clients be upset that the calls would have to be at different times, or that I would be asleep when they were awake. And I would come up against some friction with that. But now it's so clear, like you couldn't hire me and not know my beliefs. You couldn't hire me and not know, unless you just found me for one day on the internet and hired me the next. But anyone who spends a little bit of time in my content, in my world, they're going to know, okay, well, Emily's going to be off grid at Burning Man. Emily's going to be in a different time zone at least once or twice throughout the year. She's probably going to swear, drop some F-bombs on our group calls, and so people know that coming in. And I've realized that creates a lot less friction between me and my clients, because they know what they're going to get. They're not surprised. And not only that, they're stoked. Like they cannot wait to get into a community where they can be a freak too, because, we call ourselves Club Weirdo. That's like the secret behind the scenes, like, or that's like the secret name we have for our community. We call it Club Weirdo. And we've called it that from the beginning. And I just love it. Like, I love being Club Weirdo. I love being the place where people can come and feel safe to just be who they are and make money.
That's amazing. Thanks for that download. So it's such an interesting, you said so many great things there. I say sometimes, or we say sometimes, that, if you can start to put yourself online, it's one of the greatest accelerators for your own growth process that you can ever go through. And you hit the barriers and the fear and judgment. I'm curious if you would have some advice for those listening, maybe that somebody that is a little scared, maybe doesn't feel safe online, and they don't want to be attacked for who they really are. Because I know that you help a lot of people get their real message out online. What would you say to that person?
Well, I think the first thing to say is this is baby steps. So I never want someone to overly expose themselves right away. And because that can be traumatizing in and of itself. If we expose everything all at once and we're not used to doing it, that can feel really, really jarring. And so there's a couple of things that I recommend. So the very first thing, and this is a homework assignment within my Express course, actually, it's one of the first things I ask my clients to do, and I'm super happy to share it here. And it's just to start tracking where you self-censor, and not just in business, but in life. So if you go to a restaurant, they bring you the wrong food. Do you say something or do you not? There's a lot of people who don't say anything. And so they're people pleasing. And so that you get to write it a note in your phone. Okay, I didn't ask for what I wanted at the restaurant.
That's you, right? When you get a restaurant and get bad food, you don't say anything, right? I'm joking.
Yeah. So, just little things like that. Or let's say you have your feelings are hurt by something your partner says or a friend says. Do you say something or not? Do you write social media posts and have a thought in your mind of who could be reading it? And are you editing it for their gaze? So this one is crazy because people don't realize, and I include myself in this 100%. People don't realize the extent to which they're doing that. So they write a post, and then in the back of their mind, they're thinking, what's my spouse going to think? Or what are my previous clients going to think? That happens a lot in the coaching industry, especially when someone is up-leveling their niche or shifting their niche. They're afraid that if they say, hey, like for me, I've done things before where I say, okay, this program is now only for people at such and such level. Maybe I create a program that's only for people at, 6 or multiple 6 figures and up. And then I could have that fear of, oh gosh, what if my newbie clients read this and they're hurt or they're offended or they block me or whatever. And people are doing this all the time in their content creation. So that's one of my first recommendations too, is just to have the awareness, because if we don't have the awareness, we can't change anything. But as we grow that awareness, it creates some of those mini pause moments. So if I'm writing something and I'm realizing that in the back of my head, I'm worried about a previous client being hurt, then I can actually pause in the moment and ask myself and acknowledge that, like acknowledge the fear. Okay, yes, I can comfort that part of myself or love that part of myself that doesn't want to hurt anyone. And I can also come back to my truth and kind of pause that. I like to talk back to myself in my head or sometimes out loud, but pause that, wave going in my brain, or that voice going in my brain that's telling me that I need to edit, and then come back to what I really want to say. And so as part of the baby steps, it's definitely just that self-awareness piece first, but then just sharing a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And you mentioned judgment. And I actually just put out a piece of content where I was talking about this because it's very common and everybody asks me this. The thing about judgment is that it's guaranteed. It is 100% guaranteed. 100% of us are going to be judged. And guess what? We all judge too. Everyone listening to this podcast right now is judging. They like it, they don't like it. It's pretty rare for someone to be completely neutral. So if we can guarantee that we're judged, then what's our next move? Because the only way to prevent the judgment is to be completely invisible. So if we know that being completely invisible isn't going to serve us, well, then what? And so I'm not saying it's easy. And, I've definitely had occasions where I'll put out content and it's ruffling feathers, or people don't like it, or I've been, had people want to cancel me and things like that. I've actually seen people write posts that were about me that were negative. So I've seen quite a bit by this point, but it's a practice. And then the other thing that I say too, that's really helpful for me to remember, and I think it's been really helpful for my clients too, is that when we're not expressing our gifts, we're reducing our impact. And I know people in my world, and I'm sure people in your world, they're not just doing this to make a buck. They're doing it because they know they have a gift to give. They want to be compensated for it. And they want the satisfaction of knowing that in part, they've supported someone else to have whatever the transformation is. It doesn't even matter. So that keeps me going as well, knowing that I really do have this to offer to the people who it's for, and it's definitely not for everyone. And that keeps me going. So for someone who's a little bit newer, or they do have some of that hesitancy, I would just say baby steps. And then the other thing too is, you're not obligated to have anyone in your social media world. So if this means you need to unsubscribe family members from your list, you need to block them on social, you need to hide things from them. My mom cannot see my Insta stories. And the reason my mom cannot see the Insta stories is because she once wrote back, telling me how much she didn't like something I put that was a joke. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to remove you. You're muted. I don't remember what they call it in Instagram, but anyway, my mom can't see my Insta stories. And she's not on my email list anymore, I don't think. And I'm okay with that. So sometimes we do have to make those tough decisions, but I'll say it again, even though I just said it, you're not obligated to have people in your world. So if there's a particular person, a specific person that you're censoring simply because they exist in your social media world, just release them. And I know people might feel guilty about that, but you got to do your work in the world. And if that's preventing you from doing your work in the world, then you have a decision to make. So either you keep hiding and censoring based on this one follower, or you make a different decision and you release them from whatever it is. Something else, especially for very, very taboo niches, or, even like in psychedelics, it's not legal in all places. Having a private forum to be expressed is also helpful. So it could be a private Facebook group, obviously an email list. There are different ways to get your message out and express. And I never want anyone to put themselves at risk. So, consider those things as you're deciding how and where you are going to share yourself. But there's lots of different ways to do it. It doesn't need to be just one way.
I love all of that. One of the things that I've seen you express in your fullest expression on Facebook, at least where I'm connected with you, is how you feel like your industry, the coaching industry, needs to kind of grow up a little bit. Will you talk about that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been a big one. And this is one that I know people don't like. So listen, I've been outspoken since I was a kid. It's gotten me in a lot of trouble, but it's helped me a lot too. And, I think the coaching industry, especially because it's unregulated, there's like zero bar to entry. I mean, anyone could just throw up a website and decide that they're a coach one day to the next. And, that's beautiful in a lot of ways, but I also think it's harmful in many ways. And so I've spoken out quite a bit around things that I don't agree with in our industry. So manipulative sales is one, and that looks different for different people. So there's the kind of stereotypical bro markety, pushy, manipulative sales. But there's also on the other end of the spectrum, this very fluffy kind of selling this magical thinking that's more common for women in the industry and very, very spiritual women in the industry. And there are a lot of practices that I don't think are helpful. There's also just a lot of bad advice out there. And I'm not saying all my advice is perfect and the best, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the coaching industry that I've got, some pretty big and strong opinions about. And I've definitely been sharing that. And something that has been just kind of interesting to me to see is that I've noticed content from other people that says, if I see anyone talking about the coaching industry, I immediately block them. I'm only here for positive content and, all of this. And I think that's really unfortunate because I am a truth teller. So of course I have a soft spot in my heart for truth tellers, but for those of us who are speaking out about these things and these practices that truly are harmful, it takes a lot of freaking guts and courage. And actually, I want to say that right now, that I think some people witness me or other people online who are very outspoken and think it's easy for us. And actually it isn't. So while in some cases it comes naturally for me, it still takes a lot of courage because I know there's going to be backlash. I know people are going to unfollow. I know people are going to block. I know people are talking shit behind the scenes. I know that all of these things happen, and I'm just the personality type where I feel an obligation. If I don't say something, I feel like I'm part of the problem. And so I've really wanted to be that voice in our industry. And honestly, I've wanted to be a voice that people can depend on. And I do think people expect me to say something, because for years I have been that outspoken person. So again, it's one of those things where it's why some people choose me. And it's also why some people don't. And so I just have to live with that and know that I wouldn't feel like me if I didn't speak out about my beliefs, whether it's about the coaching industry, politics, Black Lives Matter, supporting the queer community, whatever it is. I cannot not say something. I've been an activist since I was a kid. And so this is what my activism looks like now. And yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about this, but that's kind of the start of that topic.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think you have to be yourself, and maybe you can lead us down, because I know we started this talking about how to sell more authentically. Once you start to, show up with your authentic self and what you're meant, who you really are, how does that lead into maybe easier sales and attracting the people you want and, like selling authentically so you're not pushy? Can you give some advice to our listeners how those two things maybe connect and become drinking buddies or whatever it is?
Yes, exactly. Okay, so here's the thing. We're all bombarded with stuff on social media. We now have like worse attention spans than a fish at this point. I mean, just the human brain, if we don't capture someone's attention immediately, they're moving on to the next thing. They're scrolling. We've heard of like death scrolling, where you're scrolling and watching reels for hours or whatever. And the content that is self-censored, the content that is watered down is the boring content. It's the vanilla stuff. Nobody's going to stop their scroll for the thing that's cliche that we've heard 1,000 people say before. And so if you want to be a scroll stopper, you've got to be self-expressed. That is just primary. And by the way, again, I want to emphasize this because I know what some people are thinking right now. I want to be so clear that self-expression does not mean that you have to be big, bold, loud, spastic, sassy like I am. You just have to be you unapologetically. So even if you're like a mostly silent meditator, put that content out. That's going to be cool for your people. And then as far as this pertains to sales, so, I mean, there's so much I could talk about on sales, but as far as where sales and self-expression intersect. So, in for the context of sales, I'm talking sales calls, I'm talking like written, I'm talking webinars, masterclasses, anything like that. But there's a practice that I do and teach with my own clients, but I do it a lot also in a one-on-one setting. So when I'm working with a high-level client and we're working on their sales, one of the things that we do, and you know, anyone can kind of copy this exercise that I'm about to share. We all can feel when something feels even a little bit off. And so when someone is practicing, you know, making their offer, so whatever it is that you're sharing with a client about your offer, or let's say you've got a webinar coming up and you're going to be selling a program that's like $1,000 or $2,000, it doesn't even matter what the price is. I would highly recommend that you role play that with another human. And this human does not even need to be good at sales, but what you want to be picking up on are what I call energetic bumps. And so whenever I'm going to be doing a webinar, let's say I'm selling my sales power program and I'm going to be doing a webinar and we're selling sales power. I always have my team do a role play with me. We'll do it like a few days before. And what I'm looking for and what I'm asking my team to look for are these energetic bumps. And the way that I can describe what an energetic bump is like those little moments where you feel weird, or those little moments where you get like a funky feeling in your stomach, even if it's for like a millisecond. And you want to pick up on what all of those little things are. And they seem subtle, but I'm telling you, they will make a massive difference in the way that your audience responds, because you're going to be cleaning it all up on your side. And when you shift those tiny little things, maybe it's just the way you're saying something. Maybe it's just something that is like not the most authentic way that you would describe it. Those little energetic bumps, and then they're like little speed bumps. And then you tweak it. So you notice, I felt a little weird when I said that. What's a way that feels more me to say it? Or for me, often what happens is, you know, as an ever evolving person, something I believed a year ago is like shifted in maybe a nuanced way, but feels a little bit different. So I might look at like an old script of an offer and say, you know what, I don't completely believe it just like that anymore. And the way that I would describe it now is this. And so looking for those little places, and I'll give you an example. I was coaching a private client and he was running through his offer, and I would just notice these weird little things he was doing. And I would say, why are you doing that? And then he would tell me why he's doing it. And, you know, he's very successful. He'd been trained by other trainers in the past, sales trainers specifically. And he said, well, so-and-so taught me to do that as like a tactic to prevent, you know, let's say a spouse money objection or something like that. And I was like, okay, I get that you were taught that, but take that out. Because when I hear you saying this weird tactical thing, I feel uncomfortable. I feel like you're being a little bit sleazy. My clients have to be willing to hear the truth. It sounds a little sleazy. I feel like you're like trying to manipulate me. And so what if we took that out? And what if you just showed up just as who you are and you made me this offer human to human? And his results from us going over with a fine-tooth comb, I mean, like very agonizing detail, but to me, it's so sexy. You know, he was able to raise the price of his program from $15,000 to $25,000. His close ratio went up. He had a $250,000 launch. And it's all because he didn't even use my sales script, by the way. He was trained already. And so instead of me teaching him my method, because it doesn't even necessarily matter the method, all I did was go through in this massive, crazy, fine detail with him. I picked up on all of those energetic bumps and weirdness and took it out and just had him show up more as him. And so any of you can do this. I mean, if you're like willy-nilly and have no idea how to sell, this is not going to work. But if you're already using a sales structure of some kind, and you can do this sort of role play exercise with someone, we can all feel this stuff. We all feel when something feels sleazy, you know, when we get hit with a pitch, we know if it feels genuine. And even if we don't want the thing, we know when it feels genuine and just pure and true versus like, I think this person's trying to pull one over on me. We can feel that. And so that's a huge recommendation that I have. And if anyone actually listens to this and does it, I promise you, your sales are going to improve. If you're willing to hear the feedback of, where you're coming across a little bit inauthentic, I promise you, you're going to have your sales increase. You can't not, because it's those little energetic, funky undercurrents that get communicated unconsciously. So your audience, your potential client, they might not be able to put a finger on why they don't want to buy, but that can be a huge reason why. So I love this exercise. It definitely works, and it's worth doing a few times. But even if, like, let's say you got a webinar tomorrow, you just heard this podcast, you're like, shit, what do I do? To have one person do this with you, one run through, and make a couple, small tweaks, it's going to change the results, guaranteed.
I love that. I think role playing is highly undervalued, and most people don't do it. Even for regular webinars, they don't do it. Just ongoing webinars. It's such a great tool. Kylie and I did that, I don't know, maybe a month ago. We ran through a webinar in advance, and it was really useful. So we changed a lot just from that run through.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the idea of energetic speed bumps. I think that's, I like it's super powerful. I live in Barcelona now, and there are a lot of speed bumps around here, and I'm not a big fan of them. And I normally try to go around them. So, well, it's been great having you on, Emily. You've given so much value to our listeners, and I'm super excited. I kind of want to hire you and work with you too. So I think our communities would probably kind of have a good mixer at a party. I think they're quite similar in a lot of ways. So if somebody wants to learn more about your programs and about you and how they can work with you, can you maybe share where they can find more information about you?
Yeah, sure. So I think the best way to see what I'm all about is checking me out on social. So on Instagram, I'm at Emily Rose Utter. You can find me similarly on Facebook at the same. Side note, I love Barcelona. I'm completely obsessed. I lived there this summer. So I would love to come out and go to town with you on sales.
We have our own mastermind. Everybody's coming here in end of May. So maybe you can fly out.
Oh my gosh, please invite me. I want to come out. I would love to meet your people. That would be so fun. But yeah, I'd love to have people check me out on social media, and then happy to provide some other free resources if you guys want to pop anything in the show notes. It wouldn't be an easy URL to spell out, and I don't even know what it is, but we do have some things like that if that would be helpful for your audience. This has been so fun. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for jumping on and chatting with us for a little bit. I'm sure people will get a lot of value out of it. So good conversation.
Yeah. And I just love that you're helping people get their work out into the world. And we need more impact players out there to kind of shift the consciousness of every industry. So yeah, thanks for sharing your gifts. And if you want to get the show notes, you can go to consciousmarketer.com/podcast. We'll have the show notes. We'll have the links to Emily's websites and social platforms, and you can contact her if you want. And we don't do any advertising here. All we ask is that you share it with a friend, or if you see it on social media, share it with a few people and spread the word, because that's how we can help the world and be of service. Thanks again, Emily. And thanks for the listeners for listening today. Bye for now.